It was the kind of house people crossed the street to avoid, not because of what was known about it, but because of what wasn't. Hidden beneath the moss, choked silence of the village of Saint Ciel, the house on Rue d'Arc stood like a wound that never closed. It didn't ask to be looked at. It didn't try to hide either. It simply remained, watching, waiting, breathing. If walls could breathe. Jacqueline Duval had arrived in the village without fanfare, towing a rusted trailer and a locked canvas box of unfinished portraits. She was in her early 40s, her beauty dimmed by exhaustion, her hands still stained with the ghost of oils and varnish. Paris had consumed her slowly, first her marriage, then her mind. She needed quiet, clean air, stillness. The kind of stillness that didn't have memories attached. The house was cheap, unreasonably so. An old 18th century farmhouse painted a fading crimson, shutters nailed shut, and a warped sign in the overgrown yard that simply read vendor. For sale. There was no listing, no paperwork, just a handwritten note tucked under the front door. Take it if you must. But once you enter, it won't let go. She assumed it was some local prank, a joke on the outsider. She entered anyway. The first thing she noticed wasn't the smell, or the chill, or even the way the hallway tilted slightly left. It was the sound, or lack of it. The house was too silent, as if the air itself held its breath. She coughed and it echoed wrong, like the walls absorbed noise faster than they should. That night, she unpacked her brushes and sketchbooks in the sunroom. The windows were grimy, but they showed the forest just beyond the hill. Black pines bent like mourners, their branches scratching each other with each gust of wind. She drank wine, lit a candle, and dozed off on the chaise. And at 2:44 a.m., the house cried. It started soft, so soft it could be mistaken for wind through a pipe. But it came from inside the walls, a weeping, faint, feminine, broken. As if someone were hiding behind the plaster, knees tucked into their chest, sobbing so hard it hurt. She woke slowly, unsure whether it was a dream. The crying faded as soon as her feet touched the floor. She stood still, heartbeat thudding in her ears. Nothing, no wind, no mice, just silence again, a heavy, leaden silence. On the third night, the sound returned, louder. This time, it wasn't just crying. It was whimpering, a pleading sound, wordless and rhythmic, like a voice that had forgotten how to speak. The sound seemed to move from one wall to the next, like it was following her footsteps from room to room. She pressed her ear to the kitchen wall, and for a split second it stopped. Then, from behind the wall, the faint scrape of fingernails. That was the first time she considered leaving. She packed a bag the next morning, but her car wouldn't start. The battery, which had been new 2 months ago, was dead. The mechanic from town came out, tried jump, starting it, and frowned. "You parked near Magnets?" he asked, confused. "Your battery's been drained clean, like it was fed on." She tried laughing, but her voice cracked. She walked home instead. The house loomed larger than she remembered. That night, the walls blood. She had just turned off the hallway light when she noticed the glint, dark red liquid oozing from the space where the baseboards met the wall, not dripping, seeping. She touched it without thinking. It was warm. It smelled faintly of iron and rotting wood. When she washed her hands, the water turned gray. Her fingers felt numb for hours. The next day, her fingertips were pale as porcelain, cold to the touch. She tried calling the land registry, but no record of the property existed. Not under Rue d'Arc, not under any previous owner. She began to paint again, almost compulsively. But the images that came weren't hers. They were places she had never seen. A black staircase spiraling downward into darkness. A cradle surrounded by shattered mirrors. A woman stitched at the mouth, kneeling before a furnace. The paintings came fast, uncontrolled, and she couldn't stop. Each night, the crying grew louder. At 2:44 a.m. exactly, the sound erupted, no longer just weeping, but desperate screams filtered through the walls like they were drowning in plaster. Doors slammed without wind. Candles extinguished on their own. The shadows in the corners twitched, elongated. The mirrors delayed her reflection, a blink too slow, a smile that didn't belong to her. By the seventh night, she had torn out part of the hallway wall. Behind the sheetrock, she found more walls, 3 thick layers, each painted with symbols she couldn't recognize. Circles layered over names, charcoal smudges of eyes. A pattern of hands pressed into the wood, like someone had lived inside. She turned to local legend. Madame Vernet, the old widow who ran the candle shop on the edge of town, was the only one willing to speak. Her eyes darkened when she heard the house's address. She didn't speak, only pressed something into Jacqueline's hand. A small piece of parchment, one word written in blood, inky feed. That night, Jacqueline stopped fighting. The next morning, her car was found abandoned in the forest, the keys still in the ignition. The house was locked from the inside. When the police entered, they found only her paintings, hundreds of them, all showing the same hallway, the same crimson walls, and a woman stitched at the mouth, standing just behind the viewer, always just out of reach, her eyes gray like the fog rolling through the village. The final painting was the most disturbing. It showed a figure inside the wall, its hands pressed forward, mouth open in a silent scream, eyes full of mourning. Underneath it, scratched in gray ash, she listens now. The house still stands. No one speaks of it. And at 2:44 a.m., if the night is very still, you can hear the walls breathe and sometimes weep. It was a discovery that should never have been made. In the summer of 2009, while clearing out their late grandfather's attic in a quiet corner of Maine, the Fletchers found an old storage trunk sealed with 2 rusted latches and bound in electrical tape. The air around it felt colder than the rest of the attic, though there was no ventilation. Inside were mementos, military badges, antique books, a withered photo album, and at the bottom, wrapped in yellowed newspaper, was a dusty black Sony Handycam. There were 6 tapes. 5 were unlabeled. The 6th had a small, sticky note with shaky handwriting in faded marker. Do not watch alone. Do not watch more than once. Do not let it remember you. They should have destroyed it. But curiosity is a quiet invitation. A door left slightly ajar in the back of the mind. That night, the family gathered in the living room. Mark Fletcher, his wife Elaine, and their 2 teenage children, Nina and Aaron. The youngest son stayed upstairs. He was too young, they said. And this was just some old VHS relic from a forgotten time. Probably something funny or maybe even sad. Nothing real, nothing dangerous. They inserted the tape into an old camcorder. It clicked. The screen flickered. What played wasn't violent. It wasn't even overtly frightening at first. But it was wrong, deeply, instinctively wrong, like a dream that turns sour halfway through, and you can't wake up. The footage was simple: a boy, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, sitting at a dining table with a red crayon in his hand. The room was silent except for the hum of old electronics. The boy was coloring fast, aggressive strokes, his hand twitching like it didn't belong to him. There was no one else in the room. But he was talking, whispering, pausing, listening. Whispering again. The sound on the tape was warped, distorted, like it was recorded underwater. The boy leaned in towards something unseen, just off screen, and whispered, "Are you going to show me the other face now?" The family exchanged uneasy glances. Mark laughed nervously. Maybe this is a prank tape, an art project. Then the camera shifted, only slightly. The focus jittered. It was as if something else had taken control, reframing the shot so that, in the glass of an old TV behind the boy, something could be seen, not clearly, just a glimpse, a hand, or something like one, pale, elongated with too many joints, too many fingers. Elaine paused the tape, rewound, played it again slower. The shape was there, but only for 2 frames, barely a blink. Still, no one spoke for a long time. The boy began drawing something now. A symbol, uneven, frantic. A circle with a vertical slit down the center, surrounded by 20 short lines, like tally marks or bindings. Then the boy spoke again. A soft, resigned whisper. I told it I remembered. That was my mistake. The tape distorted. Lines cut across the screen. The boy looked up, directly into the lens, and for a moment, his eyes flickered white. Not a camera glitch, not overexposure. Something had passed over him. The tape ended in static, but beneath the static, barely audible, was a voice. Low, ancient, mechanical, repeating over and over, I am the thing you forgot. I am what you locked away. That was the last time the tape played properly. The next day, the handycam wouldn't turn on, the tapes wouldn't eject. The footage was gone, only static. But the consequences had already begun. 2 days later, Mark vanished. He had gone out for gas on a Sunday afternoon. The station was only 10 minutes away. His car was found idling at the pump, door open, keys still in the ignition. The cashier remembered seeing him step out of the car, looking over his shoulder like he heard something behind him. He never came inside. He never got back in the car. He simply disappeared. Elaine began drawing in her sleep. Circles, the same vertical slit, over and over on the walls, on the mirrors, even on her own arms. I can feel it inside the ink, she whispered. It's crawling up the walls. Their daughter Nina stopped speaking. She stared blankly at the blank TV screen in the living room, smiling faintly. When her brother tried to touch her, she flinched like she'd been burned. Then she said, I see him now, in reflections. He's wearing my mouth. Aaron buried the handycam in the woods, snapping the tape reels in half. But even after that, the humming continued. A sound like wires pulling tight, like breathing slowed down until it sounds like singing. The police got involved. 2 officers took the tapes in for analysis. One disappeared on his way home. The other was found in his basement, having drawn the symbol on every wall, every piece of paper, his own skin. Scrawled in charcoal above the basement door. If you see its face, it becomes yours. What they had watched wasn't a memory. It was a message, a warning encoded in imagery. A mimic, an entity that had been locked away, erased, forgotten. And now, it remembered. Worse still, it wanted to be remembered again. 3 months later, the tapes were blank, no sound, no image, just static. But the family, torn apart, fragmented like glass. The final drawing found in the house showed 4 people sitting in front of a screen. Behind them, a shadowed figure with no face and no skin, just a stretched canvas of colorless flesh. Watching them. Above the image, written in a child's scrawl, you saw me once. That's enough. Since then, the symbol from the tape has shown up in other places, carved into the base of a crib in Oregon, scratched into the underside of a mirror in Istanbul, etched into the window of a school bus in rural Indiana. And the boy in the footage, no one ever identified him. But there are rumors, whispers on old forums, fragments of stories shared by night shift workers and insomnia addicts, that if you hum the tune from the tape at exactly 3:03 a.m., your reflection will smile before you do. And then you'll hear a voice, soft and low, from behind the mirror. You forgot me, but I never forgot you. There's a lake in northern Ontario that doesn't appear on most maps, not because it was forgotten, but because something wanted it erased. The locals call it Lac Morts, Lake of the Dead. It lies beyond the marked trails, tucked between a wall of pine trees that seem to lean away from its waters. No birds sing near it, no animals drink from it. The wind skips over it like it's afraid to touch. The water is still, too still. No ripples, no fish, no insects. And if you drop a stone into its center, there's no splash, just silence. As if the lake swallows sound as eagerly as it swallows light. There are stories passed from old mouths to young ears. A monastery once stood where the lake now drowns the earth. a strange sect of monks, mute by choice, who believed silence was holy and that song belonged only to the divine. They built a cathedral underground, it said, a place where voices were never spoken, only hummed, notes without words, praise without form. Over time, their hymns grew darker, slower, less joyful. It's believed they tried to sing the name of God backward, undoing creation. They failed. Or succeeded, no one is sure. The lake formed after they vanished. In 2016, 4 college students, Cassidy, Leo, Myra, and Jonah, planned a trip to document lost places for a film project. They'd heard of Lac-Morts through an anonymous Reddit post, tagged only, "Don't follow the singing. It leads down." They found the lake on the 4th day, just before dusk. The trees opened suddenly, like the woods were spitting it out. The sky above was streaked with orange and violet, but the lake reflected nothing. No sun, no clouds, just flat blackness like it was painted there. They set up camp just outside the tree line. No one wanted to sleep too close. That first night, there were no sounds, no rustling, no night birds, just an unnatural stillness that made every breath feel loud. They joked about it, laughed nervously, but their voices felt small, muted, like the air around the lake drank up their words. At 2:19 a.m., the humming began. It was low, just beneath hearing, not coming from the woods or from the trees, but from beneath the lake, like dozens of voices humming underwater in perfect unison. Deep, hollow, beautiful, and wrong. Jonah picked up his recorder. It wasn't picking up any of their voices, just the humming. Leo moved to the edge of the lake, flashlight in hand. The beam barely penetrated the surface, but he froze. "Guys," he said, "there's something in the water." The others joined him, and slowly, out in the lake's center, shapes began to emerge. Faint still, tall, humanoid forms just beneath the waterline, dozens of them. They weren't swimming, they weren't floating, they were standing, rooted, watching. Cassidy whispered, "Why aren't they moving?" No one answered. The shapes stood perfectly still, heads tilted upward, arms hanging unnaturally long. Some looked as though they were draped in rotted fabric. Others, no clothes at all, just white skin stretched too thin over elongated frames. There were no visible eyes, no mouths. But somehow, you could feel them watching. Through the water, through the dark. The humming grew louder. It wrapped around the students like a fog, curling into their ears, vibrating in their chests. It wasn't in the air. It was inside them. Jonah whispered, "They're singing." Myra grabbed his arm. "Let's go." But it was too late. Leo stepped into the water. It was shallow at first, but with each step, he sank too deep, too fast. The lake didn't ripple, didn't shift. It just swallowed. Up to his knees, then waist, then shoulders. His face stayed expressionless. The humming was louder now, no longer beautiful, but guttural, choking. And then he was gone. No scream, no splash, just silence. The others ran through the trees. No direction, no trail. The humming followed them, without sound. It was inside their heads, repeating a pattern of notes they didn't know, but somehow recognized. It made their vision blur, their thoughts spiral. They didn't stop running until they collapsed beneath the breaking light of morning. When they returned with police, the camp was untouched. Leo's bag was still zipped. The fire had burned out. The lake looked calm, still dead, still watching. They found only one thing: Jonah's recorder lying exactly where Leo had vanished. The police played the audio. At first, it was static. Then, faintly, the humming. And then Jonah's voice, distant, scared, why hummed back. That was the invitation. The officers dismissed it, laughed it off as stress. But later that night, the lead detective sat alone in his hotel room, replaying the tape. Just before it cut out, there was something else. A whisper, not Jonah, something deeper, like water speaking. Silence is sacred, but you made noise. The remaining students never fully recovered. Cassidy lost all hearing within a month. No medical cause, Myra was found wandering a beach in Nova Scotia years later. Having written the same phrase into the sand hundreds of times, they are standing still. They don't blink. They're waiting for the chorus. Jonna took his life the following winter. His note said only, "The lake sings back." Since then, hikers who stumble upon Lac Morts report hearing music in the trees. Others have gone missing. A park ranger once described finding strange footprints near the shore, bare, long-toed, soaked in algae. But they led into the woods, never out. Some say the lake isn't cursed, it's a cathedral. And those who hum back are joining the eternal choir, voices with no mouth, souls with no end. So if you ever hear a song in a place that should be silent, don't hum along. That's when they know you're listening, and that's when they begin to rise.